among the top 10 questions that serious followers of God ask will be this question: what is God's will for my life? The young say, what college, what university, Lord? Who do you want me to marry? When do you want me to marry, Lord? What career path, what major? And where do you want me to live? What's God's will for my life? The middle-aged will ask questions like, Lord, should I take that job? Should I make that move? What's best for my family? And what do I do with my parents, especially the in-laws? No. What do I do with my parents when they grow infirm? And later years, Lord, when, where, how will I retire? Lord, what are the wisest investments that you want me to make? Lord, when should I say yes and when should I say no to some extreme medical treatment? We all ask those questions that basically are asking the same question: what is God's will for my life? Now, here's a great mistake that I think we make when we are seeking the will of God. We capitalize on methods. We capitalize on methods. We are eager to hear someone else's experience, how they found God's will for their life, so that we can copy them. We pick up the latest how-to book. We attend the most popular seminar of the season, Discerning God's Will in 10 Easy Steps. I want to suggest something this morning. Forget that. Pretty much just forget the methods. Instead, concentrate on the relationship. Not the methods, the relationship. Focus not on knowing God's will, but rather on knowing God. Focus not so much on discovering God's perfect plan for my life, but instead discovering the perfect God. Psalm 25. We spent the hottest month of the year in one of the coolest books. The early part of the Psalms we've been looking. Today I'll close that out as we look at the 25th Psalm. I think the heart of this psalm is from verse 12 through about 14, maybe a little bit of 15. Let's look at it there. Psalm 25, verse 12. Who then are those who fear the Lord? Now notice this. He will instruct them in the ways they should choose. What is God's will for me? They will spend their days in prosperity, and their descendants will inherit the land. The Lord confides in those who fear him. He makes his covenant known to them. And then just that first line from 15. My eyes are ever on the Lord. There's a couple of words, well, just one word that's used a couple of times here. It's used in verse 12 and it's used in verse 14. I think it is the crux of the matter of discovering the will of God. It is the word fear. Now, fear has a narrow definition to most of us. The things of which I am afraid, my phobias. Just discard that for a little bit while we're looking at Bible fear, at the fear of the Lord, because it's not narrow. It's a much broader definition. It includes respect, and it includes reverence and awe. In fact, it even includes silence. The fear of the Lord. Max Lucado says Job's problem is that he talked too much. Now, if you've read the book of Job, you know whose words are in there the most. Job's. He said he was a great man, a good man, but he talked too much. And Max said, good illustration of this. He said, I was in Brazil. I had taken my mother and her friend to see Iguazu Falls, the largest waterfalls in the world. Now, he said, a few weeks earlier, I became an expert on this subject by reading a National Geographic article. So, he said, as we were hiking on our way to the falls, he said, I gave them the Iguazu nature report. He said, I chattered the entire hike. And as we walked, he said, I caught myself speaking louder and louder. I'm not sure why. He said, a sound in the distance was forcing me to raise my voice. And finally, he said, I was shouting above a roar. And he said, that can prove quite irritating. He said, I was irritated. And I kept thinking, whatever that noise is, I wish they'd shut it off so I could complete my lecture. Of course, his words were being drowned out by the force and the fury of the falls that he was trying to describe. And he said, even my mother would rather see the falls than hear from me. You know, he said, there's times when the splendor should cause us to shut our mouths. When to speak is to, as he's put it, is to violate the moment. And when silence represents the highest respect. That's all part of this concept of fearing the Lord. Our relationship with God should be like that. We should be able to use that Bible word fear to describe our relationship to Him. It should be kind of like watching a great storm from a safe distance. Or how about this? I think this is even better. Being in the middle of the storm, but in a safe, cozy place. You know, like sitting by the fireplace, looking out the window of a little cottage at the blizzard that is howling around us. Our relationship with the Almighty. Don't bypass that aspect of your relationship with the Lord. You want to know God's will? What does God want for me? In other words, you want to be wise? You probably know this proverb. You've probably got it memorized. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of what? Wisdom? Of knowing? Of knowledge? Lord, I want to know your will. Fear me. I'm going to suggest that we look at our fear quotient this morning, okay? Our spiritual fear quotient. And I think that means asking the right questions. That's the title of the message. Asking the right questions. Questions that will measure your fear quotient. To understand the will of God, I need to display the fear of God. To understand the will of God, I need to display the fear of God. Two questions as we measure our fear. Number one, am I trusting Him? Am I trusting Him? Back to our psalm here, starting with the first verse. In you, Lord my God, I put my trust. I trust in you. Do not let me be put to shame, nor let my enemies triumph over me. No one who hopes in you will ever be put to shame. Trust is very much a part of godly fear. Am I trusting Him? To what? In a couple of areas. First of all, am I trusting Him to reveal His will? Do you know that God will even reveal His will to sinners? Look at verse 8. Good and upright is the Lord, therefore he instructs sinners in his ways. Do we trust him to reveal his will? Look at verse 9 and 10. He guides the humble in what is right and teaches them his way. All the ways of the Lord are loving and faithful toward those who keep the demands of his covenant. He desires to share his will. He doesn't play hide and go seek with his will like we act so often. He doesn't make a game out of it. He wants to show it more than we want to know it. I like what Hebrews 6 tells us about that. Hebrews 11, the faith chapter, but the 6th verse of Hebrews 11. Again, some of you have this memorized. And without faith, it's impossible to please God. That's all about trust. Because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. Look at that last portion. He rewards those who earnestly seek him. Am I trusting him to reveal his will? Do I believe that God is a rewarder? That he's a revealer of his will, not hiding it? That God, in fact, is going to use every channel possible to get through to me? He's going to start with this. He's going to start with his unfailing word to get across to us his will. But he's going to use everything he can. He'll use other people in our lives. He'll use circumstances in our lives. And yes, he'll use feelings to try to communicate what he desires. So, if we're gonna apply, for instance, this Hebrews passage, that means we have to believe God is a rewarder, and I'm therefore going to act like a seeker. That he rewards those who earnestly seek him. Act like a seeker. Act like a seeker. That is often very difficult to seek, because seeking is an arduous, difficult process. But sincere seeking always results in a stronger relationship with God. I didn't learn anything in those hours that I spent in prayer. I didn't learn anything about what he wanted me to do. No, maybe not. But did you get to know him better? Because in seeking, we strengthen our relationship. And the fact is, that's a whole lot more important than getting some individual question answered. Because you're getting to know God, not just his will. And to get to know God is to discover his will. I think about Jacob. You know, Jacob really wanted specific blessings from God. So much so that sometimes he just did the wrong thing to try to get the right thing. And what about that story in Genesis 32 when he wrestles with God all night long? And he says, I won't let you go until I receive the blessing that I desire. Could it be that one of God's chief complaints today about us, his children, is nobody wants to roll around and wrestle with me anymore. No one wants to, struggle and engage and encounter me. They just want answers. Am I trusting him to what? To reveal his will, to believe that he wants to be with me and to share with me what he desires. But I think there's something more important even than that as we're looking at this trust issue here. Not only am I trusting him to reveal his will, but am I trusting him to care for me? Look at verse 2. Again, I trust in you. Don't let me be put to shame. In other words, take care of me. Nor let my enemies triumph over me. Lord, even when I make stupid choices and I'm trapped by my enemies, Step in, please, and save me. You know, it's so easy for us to fall into what I would call the paralysis of indecision. We become frozen in mistrust by saying, well, I'm not going to do anything because what if I make the wrong choice? You know what the answer is to that? What if I make the wrong choice? So what? So what? We'll just fall into the arms of a loving Heavenly Father who cares so much for us. Our methods may be and often are faulty, but if we trust Him to care for us, this is saying to us, He will be faithful. I love this line out of a song that I heard years ago. Though there have been times I've been out of His will, and isn't that the truth? Though there have been times I've been out of His will, I've never been out of His care. Wow. So to understand the will of God, I need to display the fear of God. Well, how do I know if I have a true fear of the Lord? If I have a mature fear of the Lord? Well, ask yourself this question. Am I trusting Him? And then ask yourself this second question. Ask the right questions. The second one, am I obeying Him? We saw a little bit in some of the verses we've already read. How about then looking also at verse 10? All the ways of the Lord, and Clay really touched on that last week out of Psalm 119. All the different descriptions of the ways of the Lord, like His statutes and His principles, His commands, His word. All the ways of the Lord are loving and faithful toward those who keep the demands of His covenant. Did you catch that? Did you read the fine print there? Easy to miss. Those who keep the demands. George MacDonald said obedience is the opener of eyes. Am I obeying Him? And again, I think I want to kind of split that into two ideas. First of all, His general will. Am I presently obeying His general will? There is no reason for God to reveal His specific will to someone who's not obeying His general will. I can almost hear God saying, why should I reveal to that young man whether or not he should marry that young woman? Why should I reveal that to him? Because, of course, to marry her would be then to honor her with faithfulness for the rest of his life. Why should I reveal to him when he's already practicing sexual impurity, when he's already unfaithful? There are, some verses that absolutely are specific about God's will. We kind of avoid them. His general will, and yet very specific in a sense. How about this? 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 3. The first four words, it is God's will. Ooh, okay. And that's exactly what we're looking for, right? God's will. It is God's will that you should be sanctified. That's kind of a general word that most of us don't really understand all that well. It means something about being good, right? Well, here it's got a colon, and it says exactly what he's talking about. He says that you should be sanctified, colon, that you should avoid sexual immorality. Then he goes on and explains that even further in other parts of holiness and sanctification. It is God's will that we be holy. That is His general will. Are we already presently obeying Him in His general will? I can hear God saying, why should I reveal to that couple whether it's best to purchase a brand new Toyota or a brand new Nissan when they're going to spend money they don't have, that I haven't given them yet? In fact, when they're going to use the money that they had been giving to me. Why should I reveal? You see, we need to beware of the doctrine of what I would call passive availability. It says this, God, I'll go anywhere. I'll go Any place, I'll do anything that you want me to do, just as soon as you let me know. Just as soon as you give me the green light in the corner, the vision in the night, the miraculous revelation in the sky, then I will know. But until then, I'll just remain in my present lifestyle of my own choice and ignore your general will. That's the problem with passive availability. It ignores God's general will. Here's another passage that very specific about God's will. 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 9. It is not God's will that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. God, do you want me to share with that person about Jesus? We don't need to wait for a vision to share the gospel. That's his general will. That's obeying it. And the fact is, if we will obey his general will, it often leads to then a revelation of his specific will in some part of our lives. Imagine you're in a very dark room in the middle of the day, and a pin is dropped, and you call for a flashlight. You insist that everyone with you in that room find a flashlight, and they say, "Wow, we don't really have one. We're going to stumble around here in the dark, hoping that there's one. How about we just open the drapes? How about we just open the shades?" "Oh, no, I want a flashlight." No, you see, you open to the already existing light. And then you know whether or not you need the flashlight. I must be presently obeying his general will, if I'm obeying him. And then when it comes to his specific will, I must be ready to obey that. I must be ready to obey that. Look at the fourth verse. Show me your ways, O Lord. Teach me your paths. What does that sound like? Readiness. I am ready. Guide me in your truth and teach me, for you are God, my Savior. I've got a relationship with you. My hope is in you all day long. I'm ready. If you want to know his specific will, you need to focus on readiness. Ben Patterson, in his young college days, said, "I was arguing with the local campus atheist, and he challenged Ben. He said, 'Look, you pray that your God will levitate this residence hall that we're in 6 inches off the ground, and if it happens, I'll believe.'" Patterson said, "And then will you commit your life to this God if he answers the prayer?" And the atheist said, "Of course not. That's another question entirely." I must be ready to obey his specific will. Why should God reveal his specific will if he knows you're not going to follow it anyway? He knows our hearts. The issue should not so much be, what is your will? But do I want to do your will? Readiness. And look out, God's specific will, it may require some sacrifice. You better be ready. Zacchaeus had to sacrifice some respectability, and the rich man in town climbed a tree, and later on had to sacrifice his personal possessions to know what the Lord's specific will was for him. Abraham, feeling pretty comfortable there in the land of Ur, had to leave friends, comfortable surroundings. Samson, if he wanted that special blessing, he had to keep the Nazirite vow. He had to sacrifice some personal liberty. Knowing God's will might result in sacrifice. Knowing God's specific will might produce loss. Loss of homeland. Ruth lost her homeland by choice. Daniel lost it by force. May mean loss of friends. Ezekiel sitting there all alone in the ashes. Might mean the loss of family. Boy, as Jacob chased the specific will of God, he risks losing a brother, a father, a father-in-law, relationships. How about the loss of independence? What did Jesus say to Peter? Day's going to come when you're not going to go where you want to go. Your hands are going to be tied. Somebody else is going to be in charge. If you want to follow me, you're going to have to give that independence up. It may be actually loss of life. Potentially it was loss of life for Esther. Specifically, actually, it was loss of life for Stephen. Are you really ready for God's specific will in your life? Well, to understand the will of God, I need to display the fear of God. The late Henry Nouwen, Catholic priest, professor, writer, he said, I grew up pleasing my parents. Studied hard, good grades, went to Notre Dame, Yale, Harvard. He was an acclaimed professor. Nouwen was on his way up. And now I quote, "But somewhere on the way up, I wondered if I was still in touch with my vocation, that is God's will." He said, "I began noticing this when I found myself speaking to thousands of people about humility, and at the same time wondering what they were thinking of me. So he said, I began to pray for God's clear, specific will over and over again. He said, and over a period of about 5 years through really an unusual set of rather non-spectacular events, he said, I found myself being asked to come to Daybreak. Daybreak, it was a community of handicapped individuals located in Toronto. It was a one-on-one ministry, 50 disabled people there, and 50 assistants. First thing that was asked of Henry when he went there was to work with Adam. Adam was 24 years old. He could not walk. He could not speak. He could not dress himself. His body was deformed. He had frequent epileptic seizures. And you never knew when you were with him if he recognized you. Henry said, I was a university professor. It had been a long time since I had touched anyone's life closely. He said, I dressed him, bathed him, brushed his teeth, combed his hair, fed him. Feeding alone took an hour. And I quote, this broken man was the place where God was speaking to me in a new way. Now there's God's specific will. You never know just where God's will is going to take you. You never know. But you'll never discover His will until you say, I will trust, I will obey. And that sums up the fear of the Lord. Let's stand together. We're going to sing a song that Carrie's going to lead us in. I think I know what we're going to do. We're going to take a good look on the inside we're going to take a close look at our relationship with Him. Try to put that in order. Maybe that means a time in prayer, right where you stand. Maybe it means you want to go to the back. You want to pray with the Rudies there in the back. Maybe it means you want to come to the front and share. Maybe it means you want to come to Jesus. You know, we use that term nowadays. We're going to have a come to Jesus meeting. Well, it all started really here. Initially, coming to Jesus means I come to make Him Lord for the rest of my life. That's called being a Christian. If you have that on your heart, we want to be involved and share with you in that decision. We welcome you to come for that. Let's let Carrie just lead us.